Speaking of chaos, is that a good transition?
Indeed. All right. And speaking of Biden, an accidental moment of candor here. He gets asked a question about our ongoing attacks on the Houthis. Now, remember the context here. The Houthis, who basically are in charge of running Yemen, they're basically now the official government in Yemen, have been blocking the Red Sea in opposition to Israel's bombardment and what they and I describe as a genocide of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So they've been doing that. The U.S. decided that we had to get involved here. We had to protect commerce on the Red Sea. And so because our initial response wasn't working, we decided to go that step forward and start bombing Houthi facilities in Yemen without congressional authorization, by the way. So Biden gets asked about this. Hey, is this working? Let's take a listen to what he has to say.
Working. Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Okay.
I mean, this is such an incredible admission. I guess he's like too elderly to come up with a lie on the spot, so he just tells the truth. But Saagar, it's just remarkable how U.S. foreign policy, like, what is it even about? Mm-hmm. Clearly, he's admitting they don't even have an expectation that this completely foolish and dangerous escalation that they've decided to engage in here, they don't even have an expectation that it's going to work. We know from the reporting, not only has it not worked, it hasn't damaged the Houthis' offensive capabilities significantly. It has not deterred them whatsoever. If anything, they have scaled up the attacks since we started bombing them directly. And you have more cargo ships than ever rerouting outside of the Red Sea and avoiding this area completely because now it's an active war zone. Gas prices immediately once we announced this bombing campaign went up. We talked last week about how Shell is saying we are not bringing our ships through here whatsoever. So it has been completely, wildly counterproductive. They know that. He admits it, and yet it's still, yeah, but we're going to keep doing it, this foolish, stupid, counterproductive policy for no reason whatsoever.
If I were to describe blob foreign policy, blob, by the way, is like the nickname for, Washington establishment thinking, I would actually put this as the perfect example, where it feels good, right? We're like, well, these guys are going to fire at our ships, and we're going to take it right to them. I have nothing against that, as long as it works, but that's the issue. It's got to work, and it always feels good to drop a bomb, to drop, a couple $1 million or whatever in ordnance. Everybody gets to play with their toys, and we get to watch some cool videos online. But then you're like, but now what? Did the bombing actually stop? And we brought everybody the news that in general, the offensive capability had been only slightly reduced. It didn't take a genius. I said it from day one. I was like, look, Saudis carpet bombed these people for 9 years. They haven't been able to do any real, real destruction to their capabilities. It also, though, exposes what the word war means and what the Pentagon actually has the disdain for the American people, for the democratic process. This was the perfect example where a Pentagon spokesperson was asked, is it fair to say that the U.S. is at war with Yemen? And look at the way that this woman twists herself into knots to avoid the obvious answer of yes. Let's take a listen.
Is it now fair to say that the U.S. is at war in Yemen? And secondly, there are some reports about a U.S. MQ-9 being shot down over Iraq by Iranian-backed militia. Is that something you're tracking?
Thanks, Idris. I'll take the last one first. I have seen those reports. I don't have anything for you on that. So I'd have to circle back with you. I've seen those reports, but don't have anything to add. In terms of your first question, no, we don't seek war. We don't think that we are at war.
Just to follow up on Idris's question, you said that we are not at war with the Houthis, but if this tit for tat bombing, we bombed them 5 times now. So if this isn't war, can you just explain that a little bit more to us? If this isn't war, what is war?
Sure, Laura. Sure. Great question. Just wasn't expecting it phrased exactly that way. Look, we do not seek war. We are not at war with the Houthis. In terms of a definition, I think that would be more of a clear declaration from the United States. But again, what we are doing and the actions that we are taking are defensive in nature.
I love those grizzled Pentagon reporters be like, all right, what is war then? And they're like, what? And here's the thing, she actually gets the right answer. The correct answer is one that is declared by Congress. And yet, what are we finding ourselves in? A tit-for-tat campaign. The problem is that, as Ro Khanna articulated on our show about offensive capabilities, that was clearly an offensive action. It was described as such.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing. And that's why previously in incidents where the Houthis had approached like a U.S. ship and we fired back at them, people were not upset about it from a congressional point of view because it's obviously an act of self-defense. Somebody's shooting at you and you shoot back, that's a different story. But when you're actively trying to remove their offensive capability, then that's not the same thing. And you have to get some congressional authorization for that. And the problem is that the only sign right now from Washington is that we're going to increase. And as we have said previously, if you want to just solve this via air power, it's not possible. We're going to talk, I think tomorrow, a lot about the assessment, the U.S. military assessment of the Israeli military campaign. You can drop as many bombs as you want to on some of the most densely populated regions on the planet. You still can't kill everybody. Guess who found that out? In Japan, the United States, in our war with them. There's a reason Japan had to surrender. We did militarily conquer the entire island, because even though we could kill 100,000 people in a single night, it's still very, very difficult in order to remove total enemy infrastructure and all of that with bombs alone. That's why the plans at that time called for a ground invasion of some 250,000 troops or something crazy. So at the end of the day, if you want to solve this militarily, there's only one option. We got to occupy Yemen. I don't think that should be on the table. And yet this seems to be, honestly, I think that seems to be the more likely scenario than something else, than an actual negotiated diplomatic solution.
And it is so important anytime we talk about this to remind people that if we just force Israel into a ceasefire and use our leverage to push them to the table and to end these hostilities, this all stops. We don't have to occupy Yemen. We don't have to bomb Yemen. We don't have to do any of this. And we know this because when there was a brief negotiated ceasefire, the Houthis all but stopped their attacks. All of the, Iranian-backed militias in Iraq, all of these attacks stopped during the ceasefire. So we know that this isn't just, they're claiming it's about Israel. It's really not about Israel. No, it is about Israel. It is about what Israel is doing in Gaza right now. And yet that is taken completely off the table. And you are the U.S. foreign policy establishment, even going against the Rand Corporation is like, this is a stupid policy and it's not going to work. Clearly, Joe Biden and co. know that. And yet they feel like we have to do something and we have to be the tough guys. So I guess we need to wage a war, but not go to Congress to make it an official war. And speaking of that, let's put this up on the screen from the Washington Post. Apparently, the U.S. is preparing for a sustained bombing campaign, but definitely not a war, just a sustained bombing campaign. I'll read you some of the details here. The Biden administration crafting plans for a sustained military campaign targeting the Houthis in Yemen after 10 days of strikes failed to halt the group's attacks on maritime commerce, stoking concern among some officials that an open-ended operation could derail the war-ravaged country's fragile peace and pull Washington, love that terminology, into another unpredictable Middle Eastern conflict. I love how we just get pulled in like it's a force of nature. Like there aren't other options on the table. Like our concerted offensive bombing campaign is us somehow being pulled into war without any choice or other possibilities. It's just insane. They say they don't expect the operation will stretch on for years, like previous U.S. wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, or Syria. At the same time, Saagar, they acknowledge they can identify no end date or provide an estimate for when the Yemeni's military capability will be adequately diminished. As part of the effort, U.S. naval forces also are working to intercept weapons shipments from Iran. And it was part of that operation that led to, we now have confirmation, sadly, that two U.S. Navy SEALs died attempting to intercept weapons from Iran to Yemen. So it shows you this is not costless whatsoever, not in terms of treasure, not in terms of lives, and certainly not in terms of global stability, let alone Middle Eastern regional stability.
It just used to be, remember, Chris, do you remember when those soldiers died in, I think they were Green Berets, in Niger? And there at least was an uproar over that.
Yeah.
People were like, what the hell are a bunch of Green Berets doing in the middle of the desert getting into a firefight with ISIS? To this day, the entire thing has been covered up by the Pentagon.
Oh, they absolutely lied about what really happened.
Those guys were left out in the cold. There was some crazy stuff that happened at command. People should have been prosecuted for what happened to those men. But that's a whole other story. Now, the same level, though, of scrutiny on this, I don't see it. 2 U.S. Navy SEALs were killed in action now, it appears, in this mission. One of them, I mean, is a genuine hero who jumped in after one of the guys slipped off of the ladder and was carried off in heavy swells away. And their bodies have still not been found. They've been declared deceased now by the Pentagon. And the problem is that this is only ramping up. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is a terrifying thing that happened just a couple of days ago. So the main U.S. base in Iraq was, I love the headline, attacked by Iranian-backed rebels. Okay, but that's not the headline. The headline is that, quote, multiple ballistic missiles and rockets were fired by these militants from western Iraq that rained down on the base. Now, the reason why this is different is it's the first time so far that multiple ballistic missiles have been used against U.S. troops inside of Iraq. And what's even more troubling is that 15 Patriot missiles were actually fired to intercept these ballistic missiles and to shoot them down. Guess what, guys? Of those 15, we can put that up there, please. Each one of those cost $4 million. That means that we fired $60 million in ordnance. And what's even more terrifying is that these so-called piddly missiles that are just coming from Iran that they've been able to assemble without sanctions, they were able to get past our Patriot missile defense systems. So we fired $60 million in rockets, and multiple of our troops appear to have suffered traumatic brain injuries. And I believe one person was actually injured directly. That should terrify the hell out of all of us. A, our weapon systems don't work as well as we thought. That's number one. But two is that these guys are sitting ducks. And with the amount of technology now available to many of these Iranian-backed groups, this to me was a perfect preview of how much of a nightmare and how almost certain regional war is likely if Hezbollah does enter the war. Because they've got technology actually, frankly, even more advanced than this. And this is another thing where things are all ramping up. The Houthis obviously are Iranian-backed. You've got these Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. They've got ballistic missiles and much more advanced technology. We do not have that many troops who are in Iraq right now. And then the question is, Iraq too is in a major diplomatic problem. They're negotiating with us over our presence in the region.
Yeah, they don't want us there anymore.
They don't want us there anymore. But it's complicated. The Iranians tell them not, whatever. It's a different story. My main point is just that there's a lot at stake, and basically everything is being disrupted around all of this. And you're right. I mean, the center of gravity for this is Gaza. If the ceasefire were to stop, or if the ceasefire were to go into effect, then a lot of this would ramp down. That's not really an option that's currently being floated by anybody really in the American establishment. And what really disgusted me was John Kirby, the spokesperson for the Pentagon, who went on Good Morning America yesterday and downplayed the TBIs that were suffered by these U.S. troops in this attack. Here's what he had to say.
What can you tell us about potential injuries to American troops in Iraq, and how will the U.S. respond to this latest attack?
Well, as we understand at this early hour on Sunday morning, it's only a very small number of U.S. troops that were affected. They're being seen for traumatic brain injuries with some symptoms of concussions, but no serious physical injuries other than that. Not that that's not serious enough. Of course it is. But we understand it's a small number, and it's limited to traumatic brain injuries. Obviously, we're going to do what we have to do to protect them. I mean, these attacks have to stop, and we've made that very clear.
Just a very small number, Krystal. This is from the same people who believed Havana syndrome, who believed that Russians were shooting secret microwaves into U.S. diplomats' ears, and they passed how many millions of dollars in health. That these are our servicemen who are sitting there getting missiles rained down on them, and he's going on national television, a former admiral in the U.S. Navy, to downplay traumatic brain injury, which last time I checked is actually one of the worst things that can happen in combat because it follows you forever. You have no idea the personality changes that could come. I mean, there's all kinds of downstream effects that these guys may have to live with for the rest of their life. How can you feel, being sitting there, you have missiles raining down on you, and the freaking Pentagon or the press secretary go on television and just be like, oh, it was a very, very small number. I don't even care if it was, if it's just one, so what? Every one of their lives and all this matters. It's just the entire purpose of the government. But because they don't want to acknowledge even if there's any option or the failure of their strategy, we're downplaying. I mean, it's repulsive.
It is repulsive. Just a little traumatic brain injury. Imagine that's your son or daughter.
I know,
And to see
horrible.
this man out there. And, I was saying this to you, Saagar, the other flacks for the White House, the other shameless propagandists and liars that they employ, they at least look a little squirrely, like a little uncomfortable when they're faced with the utter lies and propaganda that they have to continue to promote. Not this man. No shame there. None whatsoever. He will just go out and proudly lie and spin and misdirect. And it is disgusting. And you know, that article that we put up before, it has an astonishing statistic in here, which I did not realize, because we've tried to cover these attacks as much as we can because they are incredibly dangerous. This particular assault, which was one of the largest since October 7th, this was the 144th attack on U.S. troops stationed in Iraq and Syria since October 7th. 144 attacks on U.S. troops in the region. I mean, first of all, this again begs the question, like, why are all these people still in the region? That's number one. Yeah. But number two, like, what are we doing here? I saw another commentator say yesterday, like, listen, even if you do not care a bit about Palestinian lives, even if you are not repulsed by the videos of 15-year-olds having to have their legs amputated with no anesthetic, even if that doesn't move you whatsoever, what possible U.S. interest is being served by this policy? Like, what possible end are we pursuing? And this is the insanity to go back to the original comments from Biden where he acknowledges, are the bombings of the Houthis working? No. Are they going to continue? Yes. It's the same thing with our policy with regard to Israel. You had Tony Blinken just recently come out, Saagar, and say, there is no military solution to Hamas. I mean, it's true, it's obvious, but then what the hell are we doing? Like, what are we supporting? We're the ones sending the 2,000-pound bombs to drop on the Gaza Strip and destroy infrastructure and murder civilians, mostly women and children. And we're openly acknowledging, well, we know this isn't going to work. Then why are we doing it? Why are we supporting it? And it shows you the level of complete insanity and disconnect from reality that has taken hold among the DC blob establishment. That they will bomb, they will, ship weapons to murder civilians, knowing that not only is it not going to work, it is actually going to achieve the opposite end of what you claim to support. Because the Houthis have never been more popular locally or around the world than they are right now. Hamas has never been more popular in the Gaza Strip or the West Bank than they are right now. Every civilian murdered in Gaza is likely a new Hamas or other militant member. They know this. They know this. And yet they continue to pursue the policy anyway. If that's not the definition of insanity, I don't know what is.
Well, I mean, like I said, it's all blob politics. Everything feels good. Everything is about obscuring like actual national interests. Krystal, as I said, I am a big fan of talking in the language of national interest, because when you do talk to Americans, people are pro-Israel. I would say in general, for people who are pro-Israel, if you were to talk to them, be like, do you think it would be worth sacrificing U.S. lives and, U.S. military in order to fight for them? They'd be like, oh, no. And it's like, well, what if I told you that American troops have been, fired upon 114 times? People are like, well, that'd be a little bit of a problem. Look, it's only a matter of time. And I hate to say it. We've already got 2 dead who've been killed, these brave heroes in this interdiction mission. It's only a matter of time. Ballistic missiles and all this stuff flying around, this amount of ordnance, somebody's going to die.
Yeah,
and
we are lucky that it hasn't happened already.
We are so lucky that it hasn't happened before. And it's just purely a matter of chance. 114.
144.
144 attacks. Once we get to 200, like, what are we doing here? And it just gets worse and worse. Already, I've seen some of the images of some of these ships that have come out of the Red Sea. Yeah. This is no joke. I mean, go back and look at the damage, for example, of like the USS Cole back in 2000. I mean, a lot of sailors died in that attack. It's only a matter of time, before something like that is allowed to happen. And that was just a tiny little skiff or something. These guys have advanced military technology. And yes, as we see with the Patriots, we can shoot some of them down. But ask Ukraine, you can't shoot everything. And it's like, it only takes one, and you can do a hell of a lot of damage. We can see it in Israel, we can see it in Gaza, we could see it, in Kyiv and everywhere else that's been targeted by these things. And a lot of people can die. One missile goes in the wrong place and you're in a whole other situation.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.